Hey guys, welcome back to the latest episode of the Withstand podcast. I hope you're doing well, and I hope that this episode and all other episodes of our podcast provide you with a little bit of calm against the chaos and a little bit of respite from everything that's going on around the world at the moment. Much of it that we cannot control, but all of it we can pray for. In today's episode, we are covering the book of Exodus, and we are in chapter 13, and this is God's word. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and beast, it is mine. And Moses said to the people, Remember this day in which you went out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out of this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. On this day you are going out in the month of Abib, and it shall be when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep this service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a feast to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and no leavened bread shall be seen among you, nor shall leaven be seen among you in all your quarters. And you shall tell your son in that day, saying, This is done because of what the Lord did for me, when I came up from Egypt. It shall be as a sign to you on your hand, and as a memorial between your eyes, that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year. And it shall be when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your fathers, and gives it to you, that you shall set apart to the Lord all that open the womb, that is, every firstborn that comes from an animal which you have. The male shall be the Lord's. But every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, and if you will not redeem it, then you shall break its neck. And all the firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. So it shall be when your son asks you in time to come, saying, What is this? That you shall say to him, By strength of hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh was stubborn about letting us go, that the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all males that open the womb, but all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. It shall be as a sign on your hand, and as frontlets between your eyes, for by strength of hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt. Then it came to pass, when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, Lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war, and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by way of the wilderness of the Red Sea. And the children of Israel went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had placed the children of Israel under solemn oath, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you. So they took their journey from the Succoth, and camped in Etham at the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day, or the pillar of fire by night from before the people. This is the word of the Lord. And this is what Dr Thomas Constable writes about the sanctification of the firstborn. This section is somewhat repetitive, but the emphasis is on the Lord's right to the firstborn in Israel and how the Israelites were to acknowledge that right. The repetition stresses its importance. Sanctify means to set apart from others for a special purpose. Every firstborn refers to the males only. This is clear from the Hebrew word used and the context. Furthermore, it refers to the firstborn of the mother, not the father, the firstborn of every womb. In response to the Lord's command, Moses instructed the Israelites to remember the day that Yahweh powerfully liberated them from Egypt. Labour gangs in ancient Egypt lived in villages entirely enclosed by walls. An example of these living quarters was found at Deir el-Medina near Thebes. To the Hebrew slaves, these villages may have looked like giant slave houses. The Israelites were to eat nothing with yeast in it in order to commemorate this day as special. Here and elsewhere, remember does not just mean to recall from memory, but to respond appropriately to what is remembered. When Yahweh brought the Israelites into the Promised Land, they were to observe the 7-day feast of Passover and unleavened bread, and they were to instruct their children about the meaning of this celebration. This feast was to be a sign to the Israelites of God's powerful work for them. It was to be a constant reminder on your hand and on your forehead of what God had done for them, so that they would obey his commands, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. In later Judaism, this verse inspired the wearing of phylacteries, leather straps worn on the arms and head of the worshipper, with boxes attached containing copies of biblical passages such as Exodus 13. The dedication of every firstborn Israelite male baby was to take place after the nation had entered the Promised Land. This was originally to be a memorial of God's redemption from Egyptian slavery, as were the feasts of Passover and unleavened bread. However, God took the Levites for his special possession in place of the firstborn. This happened at Mount Sinai. Consequently, the firstborn dedication never took place, but the Israelites did circumcise their sons and observe the Passover when they first entered the Promised Land. The donkey is the only small animal named that needed redemption. This is perhaps because the donkey was the only unclean domestic animal that Hebrews used in Egypt. God probably did not intend that the Jews should literally wear phylacteries like frontlet bands or headbands. Probably he meant that his claim on the firstborn males should always remain prominently in the Israelites' memories, like a mark on their hand and like a headband on their forehead would remind them of something important. The line of thought referred to merely expresses the idea that the Israelites were not only to retain the commands of God in their hearts and to confess them with the mouth, but to fulfill them with the hand, or in act and deed, and thus to show themselves in their whole, bearing as the guardians and observers of the law. As the hand is a medium of action and carrying in the hand represents handling, so the space between the eyes or the forehead is that part of the body which is generally visible, and what is worn there is worn to be seen. This figurative interpretation is confirmed and placed beyond doubt by such parallel passages as Proverbs 3. Bind them, the commandments, about thy neck, write them upon the tables of thine heart. For 2,000 years and more, observant Jews have taken these passages literally. The paragraphs that form their context are written on 4 strips of parchment and placed in 2 small leather boxes, one of which the pious Jewish man straps on his forehead and the other on his left arm before he says his morning prayers. The practice may have originated as early as the period following the exile to Babylon in 586 BC. It hardly needs to be said that there is nothing inherently wrong with such a custom. The boxes, called phylacteries, are mentioned in Matthew 23, where Jesus criticizes a certain group of Pharisees and teachers of the law for wearing them. Our Lord, however, condemns not the practice as such, but the ostentatious use of wide phylacteries as part of a general statement about those who flaunt their religiosity in public. Everything they do is done for men to see. But although the proper and modest use of phylacteries might be spiritually legitimate, it is probably best to understand the references from Exodus and Deuteronomy as figures of speech, since similar statements are found elsewhere in the Old Testament. The Jewish practice of wearing phylacteries seems to have originated in the Babylonian captivity. John Durham divided the book of Exodus into 2 parts, and he believed the first part ends here. With Yahweh's presence promised, then demonstrated, then given to Israel in theophany at Sinai, the first half of Exodus ends. The second half of the book is preoccupied with response to that presence, in life, in covenant, in worship, and even in disobedience. The largest part of that second half has to do with the communication to Israel of the reality of that presence through a series of set-apart places, set-apart objects, and set-apart acts, all of them intimately connected in one way or another with Yahweh's presence. It is by means of the account of the last plague that the author is able to introduce into the Exodus narrative, in a clear and precise way, the notion of redemption from sin and death. The idea of salvation from slavery and deliverance from Egypt is manifest throughout the early chapters of Exodus. The idea of redemption and salvation from death, however, is a particular contribution of the last plague, especially as the last plague is worked into the narrative by the author. By means of the last plague, then, the writer is able to bring the Exodus narratives into the larger framework of the whole Pentateuch, and particularly that of the early chapters of Genesis. In the midst of the judgment of death, God provided a way of salvation for the promised seed. Like Enoch, Noah, and Lot, those who walk in God's way will be saved from death and destruction. This 10th plague brought Yahweh's concentrated education of both the Egyptians and the Israelites to a climactic conclusion. In short, therefore, what were the essential purposes of these 10 plagues? First of all, they were certainly designed to free the people of God. Second, they were a punishment upon Egypt for her portion in the long oppression of the Hebrews. Third, they were designed to demonstrate the foolishness of idolatry. They were a supreme example both for the Egyptians and for Israel. It was by these that Jehovah revealed his uniqueness in a way that had never before been revealed. Finally, the plagues clearly demonstrated the awesome, sovereign power of God. In the book of Genesis, God is described as the creator of the heavens and the earth and all the laws of nature. In the book of Exodus, the exercise of that creative power is revealed as it leads to the accomplishment of divine goals. God's sovereignty is not only exercised over the forces of nature, but is also revealed against evil nations and their rulers. The plagues touched every phase of nature, mineral, animal, vegetable, and human. They affected persons and property and included all from the highest to the lowest. A few clues exist for determining the length of time between the first and last plagues. While no certain conclusion can be reached, the probable time is just under 6 months. Can you imagine that? As 6 months to navigate, my goodness. These plagues came upon Egypt when this nation was at the apex of its imperial supremacy, most probably under Amenhotep II. Interestingly, several of the judgments in the Great Tribulation, especially the bowl judgments, are similar to these plagues in Egypt. God will again do similar acts of judgment and demonstrate his sovereignty in the future, but on a worldwide scale. The Israelites now began their migration from Goshen to Canaan. As mentioned previously, critics of the Bible have claimed that there never was an exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, because there is no record of it in Egyptian antiquities. A study of the monuments, however, shows that the Egyptians did not record matters uncomplimentary to themselves. Furthermore, when something was recorded which proved to be uncomplimentary or distasteful to a later regime, it was effaced at the first opportunity. The way of the land of the Philistines refers to the most northern of 3 routes that travellers normally took from Egypt to Canaan. The Egyptians referred to this road as the Way of Horus. The other routes lay further south. The Egyptians had fortified this caravan route heavily. It was called the Via Maris, the Way of the Sea. The Egyptians would have engaged Israel in battle had the chosen people gone that way. When you were weak and yet very unconscious of your weakness, as the Israelites were at this time, God would not suffer you to encounter the Philistines. It would have been too much for you. In Hebrew, the Red Sea is called Yam Sup, literally sea of reeds or papyrus. Because papyrus does not grow along the Red Sea, numerous scholars conclude that the Yam Sup is actually one of the marshy lakes in the area of the eastern delta north of the Red Sea. The people marched in an orderly fashion. This is a meaning of in battle formation. Moses had not yet organized them as an army. And just on page 144, there is a map of Israel's journey from Egypt to Sinai. The writer recorded that Moses took Joseph's bones with the Israelites when they left Egypt in fulfillment of Joseph's command to do so when they returned to the Promised Land. Joseph's bones would have reminded the Israelites of God's promise to bring them out of Egypt and back into Canaan. Joseph's faith would have been an encouragement to them. Succoth was evidently north and west of the Bitter Lakes. Today the Suez Canal connects the Red Sea with the Mediterranean by way of the Bitter Lakes. Archaeologists have not yet identified with certainty the sites referred to here, such as Succoth and Etham, as well as many others of those mentioned in the records of the Israelites' journey. Consequently, it is virtually impossible to pin down their exact locations. Many of these sites were nothing more than stopping points or oases. They were not established towns. Kaiser wrote concerning their locations, "Everyone is guessing. The only stopping place in the wilderness wanderings that scholars have been able to identify without dispute is Kadesh Barnea." The wilderness referred to would have been the wilderness of Shur, which was located to the east of the Nile Delta. There was only one pillar, a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Sailhamer believed that there was one pillar of cloud and a second and different pillar of fire, but this is a rare interpretation. Like the burning bush, the pillar was a visible symbol of God's presence among his people. The Lord himself was in the pillar and often spoke to the people from it. The later hymn writers of Israel fondly remembered it. A similar cloud of smoke came to represent the glory of the Lord in the sanctuary throughout much of Israel's history. The pillar's role here may reflect the ancient practice of carrying a burning, smoking brazier at the head of an army or caravan to indicate the line of march by day and night. Some make this cloud a type of Christ. The cloud of his human nature was a veil to the light and fire of his divine nature. Christ is our way, the light of our way, and the guide of it. The pillar of cloud and fire, the token of God's presence, remained over the Israelites until they entered Canaan under Joshua's leadership. Perhaps it appeared as Meir imagined it. When the excessive heat made it necessary for Israel to march at night, the light of the fiery pillar was enough to light the way, and when in the day the scorching glare of the sun was blinding, the cloud spread itself abroad like a great umbrella, so that the women and children could travel in comparative comfort. Thus, brethren, it is evident that there was no exercise of faith whatever as to what was the will of God concerning them. The only exercise of faith to which they were called was to do that will made it manifest by the pillar of fire and cloud, and follow Jehovah's merciful guidance with unfaltering and contented hearts. It was in this day that they were so often tried, and in this that they so often failed. We, brethren, live under an advanced dispensation, the dispensation of the Spirit, and are therefore called to higher exercises of faith, of that faith which discerns the will of God in circumstances of difficulty, as well as that which walks in it when discerned. And I'll leave a link to all of these notes in the show notes for you guys. Now, given we learned that God's pillar of fire and pillar of cloud guided the Israelite steps every step of the way, today's daily devotion from Charles Stanley is titled Step by Step. It's based on Psalm 17, verse 5. My steps have held fast to your paths, my feet have not slipped. And this is what Dr. Stanley writes. Are you wrestling with questions about the future? Do you wonder why God hasn't answered them? After all, he knows the end of your story before you're even born. So why does he disclose the path ahead only one step at a time? Certainly David had many of the same questions. The Lord appointed David king of Israel when he was merely a teenager, but he didn't divulge when or how David would take the throne. Along the way, David had amazing victories that won the love of Israel's people. However, David also spent several years avoiding King Saul, who sought to kill him out of jealousy. How do you think he would have responded if the Lord had earlier revealed the exhaustion and isolation he'd experienced due to Saul's relentless persecution? By leading him step by step, the Lord navigated David through the triumphs without pride taking hold, and the defeats without despair destroying him. There are both good days and difficult ones on the path ahead of you. So the Father asks you to face life one day at a time with him. He will give you the grace and direction you need for the journey. Trust his wisdom about what to disclose. He'll tell you what you need to know right on time. And he prays, Jesus, I'll trust you one step at a time. Amen. Guys, until next time, I pray for each and every one of you. God bless you. Take care of yourselves, of each other. Keep looking up also, because it's the only way to get through everything that's coming our way, and everything that we're currently in the midst of at the moment. God bless you, take care, and as always, Maranatha.